Hi boys and girls, today we're going to continue with Frindle by Andrew Clements, and today we're going to read chapter 5, and chapter 5 is called The Report. But just want to kind of review a little bit. We left off on chapter 4, and on chapter 4 we learned that Nick had an idea. I'm just going to quickly reread the last paragraph of chapter 4, because remember, good readers always go back and reread to kind of get their brains ready for the next chapter. And so I'm just going to reread the last paragraph from chapter 4, and it says, Nick decided that giving this report could actually be fun. He could make it into something special. After all, Mrs. Granger had asked for it. And that's kind of where we left off on chapter 4, and we left off thinking about what was his plan, what was he planning to do. And so we were wondering, is his plan going to work, or is it going to backfire again? So that's kind of where we left off from chapter 4. So today we're going to read chapter 5, and chapter 5, the title is called The Report. And I'm thinking, and I'm assuming, I hope you're thinking too, and kind of making a prediction about what this chapter might be about, but it seems very obvious to me that this chapter is called The Report because Nick is going to give his report. Remember, he's going to give his report where words come from. Remember, he had 2 homeworks instead of 1. So I'm assuming and predicting that this chapter is where Nick is going to give his report. But we'll see how this report goes. So, you ready? So, chapter 5. By lunchtime the next day, Nick had a bad feeling in the pit of his stomach. 7th period was coming. He was going to have to stand up in front of Mrs. Granger's class. The eyes of everyone in the class would be glued to his face, and Mrs. Granger's eyes would be cranked up to maximum punch power. So, as anybody would be, he was nervous to go up in front of the class and give a report. I'm sure that if you had to give a report, you would be nervous as well. So he was nervous. He's in 5th grade, and so, but he was ready, but nervous. He looked over his notes again and again. The first English dictionary, the growth of the English dictionary, the growth of the English language, William Shakespeare, words from French and German, new words, old words, new inventions, Anglo-Saxon words, Latin and Greek roots, American English. It all became a big jumble mumble in his mind, and his grand plan from the night before, in the harsh fluorescent light of the school day, it seemed impossible. So the night before, he had a plan in his head what he was going to do, but now here he is, and he's not sure if he's gonna go with the plan. Sometimes, we make plans and we kind of run our plans through our head, and we're like, this is what I'm gonna do, and so on. But then when you're actually there, sometimes the plan doesn't come the way you were thinking it was gonna come. So that happens sometimes. So sometimes plans don't go accordingly. And so Nick is kind of worried about that. He had a plan, but now he's not sure if it's going to work. Okay. What is it with the clocks in school? When you're planning to go to the carnival after school, the clocks in every class practically run backward, and the school day lasts for about 3 weeks. But if you have to go to the barber or go shopping for clothes after school, zip, the whole day is over before you can blink. And today, after lunch, periods 5 and 6 went by in 2 ticks. Like, they went really fast. That's what it seemed like to Nick, because remember, in 7th period, he has to give the report. And so periods 5 and 6 went really fast, and he's like, oh no, here I am. So time is going really fast, or at least that's what it felt like for Nick. As the 7th period bell rang, Mrs. Granger walked into the classroom, took 4 steps to her desk at the side of the room, flipped open her attendance book, glanced out at the class, and made 2 little check marks. Then looking up at Nick, she said, I think we have a little report to begin with our class today. Nicholas? 15 seconds into 7th period, and Nick was already on stage. This lady plays for keeps. So what that means is she doesn't mess around. Remember, she's all business. She doesn't waste any time. So this lady plays for keeps, thought Nick. He gulped and grabbed his crumbled note cards and his book bag and walked to the front of the room. He stood next to the giant dictionary on its little table, and Mrs. Granger walked to the back of the classroom and sat primly on a tall stool next to the bookcases. She was wearing her blue uniform. Remember, she has only 2, a gray one and a blue one. Today, she was wearing her blue uniform. Taking a deep breath, Nick began. Well, the first thing I learned is that the first English dictionary, Mrs. Granger interrupted him. Excuse me, Nicholas, but does your report have a title? Nick looked blankly at her. A title? No, I didn't make a title. Class, please remember to include a title whenever you prepare an oral report or a written report. Now, please go on, Nicholas. And she smiled and nodded at him. Nick began again. Looking right at Mrs. Granger, he said, "The dictionary." You see, he's very smart. Like, he didn't have a title, but he just came up with the title right then and there. He's like, "The dictionary." That's an appropriate title, right? The dictionary. A couple of kids thought that was funny, but Nick played it straight and just kept talking. So here comes his report. A lot of people think that the first English dictionary was put together in the 1700s by a man named Samuel Johnson. He lived in London, England. He was real smart, and he wrote a lot of books. And he wanted all the other smart people to have a good dictionary to use. So he made one. But there were other dictionaries before his. The thing was different about Johnson's dictionary was its size, first of all. He had over 43,000 words in it. 43,000 words. The class made a bunch of noises at this number. Ooh, ah, wow, and stuff like that. And Nick lost his concentration. He kind of got distracted. He glanced up at Mrs. Granger, expecting to see those eyes drilling a hole in him. But they weren't. They were almost friendly, in a teacher kind of a way. She's kind of like proud. She shh the class and said, "Go on, Nicholas. That's a fine beginning." Nick almost smiled, but he saw all the kids staring at him. So he gripped his note cards even tighter and jumped back in. So he continued with his report. The other thing that Samuel Johnson did that was special was to choose the words he thought were most important, and then give lots of examples showing how the words got used by people. For example, he showed how the word take could be used in 113 different ways. Wow. Take can be used in 113 different ways. Nick's report went on smoothly for 12 minutes. So he's been up there giving this report on the dictionary and where words come from already for 12 minutes. Nick was surprised at how easy it was to stand there and talk about this stuff. At the end of the first 5 minutes, Mrs. Granger had to stop Nick again to say, "Class, it is not good manners to yawn out loud or to put your heads down on your desk when someone is giving an oral report." No one in the class cared a little bit about the report except Mrs. Granger. So I'm guessing that Nick's report about words and what the dictionary is and where words come from is kind of boring. I'm assuming it might be a little boring, and so the kids are like, oh, and they're like, oh, and they're like, oh, bored. But Mrs. Granger was really interested in what Nick had to say. So the whole class was bored, right? That's the evidence. They're not interested at all. They're yawning, their heads are on their desk. But Mrs. Granger really wanted to know. Every time Nick glanced up, she was smiling. She's happy because, I'm thinking she's happy because Nick did his research. Let's see. And her eyes were not the least bit icy or sharp. She was eating this stuff up, listening and nodding, and every once in a while she would say, very good point, or yes, that's exactly right. But the next time Nick looked up, he saw Mrs. Granger sneaking a look at her watch. She's like, 18 minutes gone. Maybe his idea was going to work after all. Time for phase 2. Reading into his book bag, Nick pulled out the red dictionary he had brought from home, the one most of the kids had, the one Mrs. Granger said they should use. Nick said, "This is the dictionary that I use at home for my vocabulary work. And I opened it last night to the very front page. And right there, I found a lot about how the dictionary was made, right in this book." I can imagine him like showing the dictionary, kind of like how I'm showing you the book. So he says, in this red dictionary, this is what I found. And so it says, and so Nick says, so I thought some of the ideas would be good as part of my report. It says here, so Nick was going to read what it says in the front of the dictionary. Nicholas, Nick looked up. Mrs. Granger got off her tall stool from the back, and its wooden tall stool and its wooden legs made a screechy sound on the floor, on the linoleum floor. Heads snapped to attention, and the class was alert again. Mrs. Granger smiled, raised her eyebrows, and pointed at her watch. Nicholas, I think the class should read that at home for themselves. See, that's true, right? Because if everybody has the same dictionary, they can just read that at home. But Nick, do you know what he's doing? He's wasting time. So he just wants to read what it says there. And Mrs. Granger says, Nicholas, I think that the class should read that at home themselves. Now, John's hand was up in the air. But Mrs. Granger. Mrs. Granger looked at him. I don't have that dictionary at home. I have the blue one. And several other kids immediately said, me too, I don't have that one. I have the blue one. Uh-oh. You know what they're doing, right? Mrs. Granger tried not to show that she was annoyed. Very well then, Nick, but it shouldn't take you too long. We have other things to do today. Nick kept his eyes open wide and nodded, adjusted his glasses on his nose, and began to read. So now he's gonna read what it says on the front of the red dictionary. So this is what it says. Without question, this modern American dictionary is one of the most surprisingly complex and profound documents ever to be created, for it embodies unparalleled etymological detail, reflecting not only superb lexicographic scholarship, but also the dreams and speech and imaginative talents of millions of people over thousands of years. For every person who has ever spoken or written in English has had a hand in its making. I don't know if you remember, but remember when he was doing the report and he was kind of mad because he had to do 2 homeworks. He also read this, and we talked. I've said that this is kind of like hard, confusing, but he's just reading this just to waste time. Remember, he is known for wasting time, and his plan was to waste the time. It was a long article, and the kids were bored to death, but no one looked bored at all. Every kid in the room knew now that the period was more than half over, and the next report wasn't just a report. It was one of the greatest time wasters he had ever invented. See? Mrs. Granger knew it too. She had edged around from the back of the room to the side near the windows. Nick glanced up at her now and then as he read, and each time Mrs. Granger's eye clicked up to a new power level. See, like she's getting madder and madder, and each time he would say something, her eyes got to a new power level. You know, kind of like when you play your video games, you go to a new level and a new level, right? After 8 minutes of Nick's best non-stop reading, her eyes were practically burning holes in the chalkboard behind him. There were only 10 minutes left in 7th period. See, she's like, but she doesn't know how to stop him. What is Mrs. Granger going to do? When he took a breath to start a new paragraph, Mrs. Granger cut him off. That's fine. That's a fine place to stop, Nicholas. Class, let's all give him a round of applause for his report. The applause didn't last long. As Nick took his book bag and notes and sat down, Mrs. Granger's eyes went back to almost normal. And she actually smiled at him. She's like, little boy, I know what you're up to. Although your report was a little long, she paused to let that sink in. It was quite a good one. And isn't it fascinating that English has more different words than any other language anywhere in the world? She pointed at her large dictionary. That one contains definitions of more than 450,000 words. Now, wasn't I right, Nicholas? All this will mean so much more since you learn about it on your own. She's like, gotcha. Mrs. Granger was beaming at him. Nick sank lower in his chair. This was worse than writing the report, worse than standing up to give it. He was being treated like the teacher's pet, like the favorite. And he had the feeling she was doing it on purpose. His reputation was in great danger. So he launched another question. He's like, oh man, you know, I was trying to do this, but now I'm looking like I'm the teacher's pet. So he launched another question. He raised his hand and he didn't even wait for Mrs. Granger to call on him. And he's, yeah, but you know what? I still don't really get the idea of why words all mean different things. Like, who says that dog means that thing that goes woof, woof, and wags its tail? Who says so? You see what he's doing? He says, who says that dog, dog, means that thing that goes woof and wags its tail? Who says so? And Mrs. Granger took the bait. What that means is she's like, oh, he tricked her again. Who says dog means dog? You do, Nicholas. You and I and everyone in this class, in this school, in this town, in this state, and in this country, we all agree. If we lived in France, we will all agree that the right word for that hairy four-legged creature was a different word, shin. It sounds like shin, but it means what dog means to us. You and me, and in Germany, for example, they say Hund, and so on, all around the globe. So like, you know, she's telling him that the people are the ones that say it. So in English, we say dog. We call that, you know, four-legged creature that wags its tail. We call it dog. In France, they call it chin, which also means dog. In Germany, they call it Hund, which also means dog. In Spanish, well, you know, what do we call it? Perro, right? So all around the globe. But if all of us in this room decided to call that creature something else, and if everyone else did too, then that's what it would be called. And one day, it will be written in the dictionary that way. We decide what goes in that book. We decide what goes in that book, the dictionary. Very important. I want you to remember this. And she pointed at the giant dictionary, and she looked right at Nick, and she smiled at him again. Then Mrs. Granger went on, but of course that dictionary was worked on by hundreds of very smart people for many years. So as far as we are concerned, the dictionary, it's the law. Laws can change, of course, but only if they need to. There may be new words that need to be made, but the ones in that book have been put there for good reasons. You see, people have come up with words for many, many years, and they put them in the dictionary. I was thinking when I was reading this, I was thinking about the word selfie. Back when I was a little girl, or even when I was in college, the word selfie didn't really exist. Did you know that the word selfie, fun fact for you, did you know that the word selfie was not known until the year 2013? And it was in the year 2013 that the word selfie was named Word of the Year. And it was written on the Oxford Dictionary. So that's something for you, kind of go look it up. It's better if it comes from you than it comes from me, right? But I'm kind of giving you an idea. Look up the word selfie and search it and say, when did the word selfie come up? Another word that I would probably want you to go look up is the word hashtag, right? We use hashtag all the time. But when I was a little girl, or even now, that little symbol means pound, or you use it as a symbol to say pages, number of pages. So hashtag is also another word that didn't exist until 2007. So go do some research. And remember what Mrs. Granger says, it's better if you go do the research than me telling you. So this is something about words that has to do with what words are put up on the dictionary. And there's the airplane that always passes by when I'm reading. Let it pass by. As you were thinking about selfie and hashtag and all those words that are new words that didn't exist when I was a little girl. Okay, so let me continue. So then Mrs. Granger, she was saying, that only the smart people for many years have written in this dictionary. And it's the law. Laws can change, of course, but only if they need to. There may be new words that need to be made, just like I was telling you, selfie and hashtag, and I'm sure there's other words. Mrs. Granger took a look at the clock. 8 minutes left. Now then, for today, you were to have done the exercises beginning on page 12 in your Words Alive book. Please get your papers out. Sarah, would you read the first sentence and identify the mistake, and then tell us how you corrected it? Mrs. Granger jammed the whole day's work into the last 8 minutes. A blurb of verbs and nouns and prepositions, and yes, there was another homework assignment. So she only had 8 minutes to teach her lesson, but she crammed it all in those 8 minutes. And Nick? Well, Nick didn't try to sidetrack Mrs. G again. He had slowed her down a little bit. But had he stopped her? No way. She was unstoppable, at least for today. And so, boys and girls, that's the end of chapter 5. And that's a very good way to end this chapter. I love how the author, Andrew Clements, ends it, because he says she was unstoppable, at least for today. Which makes me think, is she going to be unstoppable later? What does that mean? Does that mean that Nick has a different plan for the rest of 5th grade? And is he going to continue to challenge Mrs. Granger? So, I'll see you tomorrow. And don't forget to answer the questions. I know that this chapter was a little long, but it was a very important chapter. And always remember you can always go back and and pause the video or go back and listen to the places where you think are you need to review. Okay, bye boys and girls.